My name is Blake, and I'm here with fam today, and us three are going to go through how you can break down a lake and the equipment you can use on the lake, and then danger spots on the lake. I'm Blake.
I'm Reed. I'll be breaking down a lake on panfish in the winter and the safe ice and the non-safe ice and the different spots that you want to use.
Hi, I'm Callan, and I'm breaking down a lake for panfish in the summer.
So I'll break down a lake on how you can find target bass in the summertime, kind of your key spots to go off of when you first pull up to the lake. So one good spot that I typically go for first is like if I can find like a shoreline that has a really steep break, goes off to deep water really fast, and if there's docks along that can be a pretty good spot to start, because a lot of the bass will congregate towards like under docks and when the sun's high, because there's a lot of shade, and a lot of that bait will go under there to the shade. So they're gonna sit under there. And then you can look for your main lake points and whatnot, and if they have rock on it, if you're going for like smallmouth, if it has rock, a lot of the time the smallmouth will push bait up onto the rock from deep water, and it kind of forces them to stay on the rock. So those are two really good spots to try first if you're going for bass in the summertime.
So for panfish in the wintertime, normally what you're going to want to look for is you can't really look on the lake because there's ice, but you could look on a GPS or a map, and you could see the different inside turns, rocky points, and basically where there's a little bit of current but not so much current where it's unsafe. Another good thing is weeds, mainly green cabbage, not dead cabbage, not milfoil or coontail. Another really good thing is the contour lines. If they're tight contour lines, that's probably better because there's going to be a little bit of current and it's going to be tighter, so the water's just going to keep progressively going deeper or shallower. And yeah, those are the main things that you want to look for. And then unsafe ice is in between tight islands or reeds. Reeds can be unsafe because of they just take over the ice, and the ice can't grow as much on them or around them. And then another bad thing is creeks or rivers. If there's rivers or creeks coming into the lake, you want to stay away from that because that's unsafe ice. And another unsafe thing is in between islands. And yeah.
And I'm breaking down a lake summer for panfish. And I like to start out by points and about 13 to 14 feet of water, by weeds. Personally, that's what I like to do. But I don't care if there's weeds there or not. I use the live scope just to scan around there, and I go to point, and I go in between islands and on flats. Go ahead.
Can you describe flat?
Basically like a beach underwater.
Okay. So is it
Like sand.
you're looking for sand, and then does that mean like it stays like a certain depth?
Nope, it changes sometimes, like on the outskirts.
Okay.
So going back to summer bass fishing, what to kind of look for. So a lot in like your springtime, a lot of the bass are going to be up shallow, pushing bait and putting on the feed bag. But then once you get into like the dog days of summer, you don't hear of a whole lot of bass getting caught up shallow. And what they do is, so after they put on their feed bag, when the water temps rise, they start to go out deep and start to kind of chase like your bluegills and whatnot in the basin. And a lot of people don't venture out deep for the bass, and that's where a lot of like your bigger bass will go. So things you can look for when you're going out deep to try to find bass is a lot of the contour lines. Like if you have two main link points coming together, it makes kind of like a trough in the middle of them. And a lot of the times bass will push bait from outside of those troughs into the trough, and it kind of presses them so they can get on them easy. So that's one good spot to look for, or any big inside turns or sharp contour lines on the lake. Those can help you kind of hone down on where the bass might be.
Another good thing is if you're looking for bigger crappies, either they're going to be shallower with the bluegills into anywhere from 10 to 20 feet of water, or there's also going to be big crappies in really deep water, like 30 feet, that are sitting 3 feet under the ice. And then if it's late ice, you want to be fishing probably shallower water because they're ready to move up shallow and spawn. And if you're searching early ice, you could certainly fish shallow. You might not catch as many fish, but you want to move a little bit deeper progressively as the year goes on.
What's your favorite jig presentation for panfish in the winter?
For crappies, probably pinhead because of the flash that it has on it, the little spoon. And for bluegills, probably just a little dingle drop. For panfish, for bluegill, because they like a little presentation, but not very much. And I like to use that with either spikes or maybe a little plastic.
You guys use dingle drop jigs?
Sometimes there's a few other jigs, but what I like to use a lot too is a drop kick. A drop kick's always good because they get down there fast and they have a lot of action.
And yeah, what I like to use in summer for crappie is probably a jig head and minnow because it's like more of a realistic presentation, and I feel like crappies activate a lot like sooner and like into their stealth mode, if you know what I mean. Yeah, that's all I gotta say.
So I only got a couple more things about summer water bass fishing. So let's say you have a lake with a lot of weeds on it, and you don't really know where to go, what weeds to target, or really how thick of weeds to target. So a lot of times weeds always have like a weed line. So a lot of times you can go out deeper and deeper until you find where the weeds kind of stop. And a lot of those weeds make like a wall for that bait fish, which is like your minnows and your panfish and whatnot. So they'll travel along that looking for food. And a lot of times your bass will sit in the weeds, waiting for some bait to come along the weeds. And then they'll just pounce on it, kind of like a cat playing. So that's a good thing to look for. And then if you can find reeds or cattails, that's good because, again, it makes it like a wall. And then they can hide in it. And then that's pretty much it for summer water bass fishing for me.
Another thing about fishing panfish in the winter is bluegills. Bluegills mainly like to sit, if the bigger bluegills, like the bull bluegills, they like to sit in shallower water with really thick weeds. I've noticed that on some lakes, like Rush, but if you're on a lake like Pelican, like the lake that most of you guys have in front of you, there's not a lot of shallow, consistent water. There's a lot of big drop-offs and really deep water. So those bluegills will probably be sitting on the shallower inside turns and maybe some rocks, depending on how the rocks look. They'll be sitting with those rock bass, so will the crappies, and then they can be there's a variety of them. And then if you get on a few crappies with those bluegills in the shallow water, they're obviously going to be way bigger because they'll feed on all of the weeds, all of the little fish on the weeds and like the little bugs. Yeah, that's pretty much it for bluegill.
Go ahead, Mo.
What's the biggest fish you've ever caught, and what were you using to catch it?
What species are we talking about?
Biggest one you've ever caught?
It'd probably have to be a 40-inch muskie.
What'd you catch it on?
Whopper flopper bass fishing.
Where was it?
A lake by me.
Oh, okay. How about you, Reed? What's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
The biggest fish I've ever caught was an 8-foot sturgeon on the Snake River in Idaho. Oh, I caught it on a crappie. Like a 10-inch crappie. Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was by far the biggest fish that I will ever catch.
Chloe?
How do you how long have you been fishing?
Since I was 2 months old. I was in the
Do
boat.
you have the video?
She does.
What's your biggest fish, Cal?
I got a 54-inch muskie with the sucker.
Are we still on the, Chloe, are we still on the one for how long have you been fishing for? I've been fishing since I was in diapers. My dad used to take me out there.
I'm pretty sure the first time I ever went out fishing was when it was in the winter and I was 6 months old, but I don't remember exactly because I was 6 months old. And there's a video of me when I was like 4 or 5 on the internet and I was catching a crappie and I reeled it all the way up to the rod tip.
Well, I just brought my pan fishing ice rod. This is a snitch, and yeah, it's an ultralight. I like this rod because it has plenty of backbone if you can hook into a good pike or a big crappie or walleye. But I especially like it because it has plenty of yeah, there you go. Flexibility and for the tip.
What kind of handle is on
Cork.
So I'll go kind of over some normal safety things you should probably do before you get out on the ice. So all of us are out antsy to get out on the ice when it first comes around and don't really pay much attention to safety, which you should really think about safety before you get on there. So a good walking amount of ice to safely pretty much walk out on is you're like 6 to 8 inches. That's really comfortable. But a lot of things you should have when going out on the ice is one, like a spud bar, something to penetrate the ice to see how thick it is. So in case you come up on like a spring, you can tell before you step on it. And then Clam makes a float ice suit, which is really nice. So if you do go, it's like wearing a big life jacket. So if you go through the water, go through the ice, it'll pretty much make you afloat, the whole suit will, without having to wear a life jacket. And then you can bring like a throw rope, or I like going with a buddy. Just say you have someone else to help you out, or go get help if you need it. Just a couple essentials to take care of before you go out on the ice so you're safe.
Going back to like rods, my favorite rod personally is my pinhead rod, going along with my favorite bait. It's 34, 32 inch, but it's an ultralight, and it's a Della Bay. It's probably one of the best rods I've ever used because it has a lot of backbone and it has a really good tip, so instead of just ripping it, you can just steadily jig it, like use this as an example. You can just go like this with the pinhead, and I love that because you don't have to put too much work into it. It's just yeah, it's really easy. And if a fish up bites it, then you can see it right away because your rod tip just stays flat, or it goes up and your line becomes slack. It has an extremely light tip. And another really light rod, another rod I like to use is a schoolie rod. The one that I just got recently is the lightest rod I've ever used. It's not even, it's like half a pound probably, or like a pound, but it is the nicest rod ever. And yeah, I'll see.
Do you ever use spring bobbers?
Oh, well, I'm lucky enough to not have to most of the time because I get fortunate by people like Della Bay or like them when they create such nice rods where you don't have to really use a spring bobber, but you can use spring bobbers. Spring bobbers are a great way to fish, especially if you're fishing for deep water crappies where if they up hit it, then you can see the spring bobber come straight to flat and your line goes slack. And spring bobbers are a great way to fish. Chloe?
How do I know if I need a spring bobber?
Depending on how the type of fish that you're fishing for, and by how heavy your rod is. Like if you're fishing for crappies, and you have a heavy rod, you probably want to use a spring bobber so you can see if they up hit it. But if you're fishing for an aggressive fish like a bluegill, you might not need a spring bobber because of how hard they attack your bait.
I'll kind of just go over what my favorite type of rod is when it comes to pan fishing. So I use a katana, 32-inch katana from Callan Outdoors. It's a medium light. I use it mainly for like jigs and spoons. The grip on it's really unique. It's like, I would say it's like a hard rubber. And it's not a cork, it's kind of in between, but it's a weird grip to where like if your hands get slimy after grabbing so many fish, like with cork, sometimes it'll slip out of your hand, but with this, it like gives you grip over that slime. So like still gives you grip, and it's got really nice backbone, and I've just fallen in love with it over the years. Chloe, go ahead.
How do you stay warm if you can't afford to buy like a brand new Callan clothes?
Your main key of staying warm is just having layers. Because when you have so many layers, you can always take layers off, but you can never put more layers on. So like if you get warm, you can always take a layer off. And if you get cold, you can put more on. So I just say layer up. And then I know like Scheels has them here, and then like your normal grocery stores and whatnot, they sell either like bread bags or Ziploc bags, and you can put those in your boots if they're not totally waterproof, and that'll keep your feet pretty dry. And then Scheels and them also sell like hand warmers that you shake and they get hot. So those are good ways of staying warm. You can go ahead.
What pound test do you use when you're pan fishing?
So when I'm going for like when they're really hard, they don't really want to bite type of day, I'll go like all the way down to like a 2-pound test. But that's rare for me to do that. But a lot of the times I'll do either like a 4 or 3-pound test when I'm pan fishing.
If I'm pan fishing in the summertime, I'll probably use 4-pound tests. But if I'm fishing in the wintertime, kind of like what Blake said, I'll probably be fishing to that 3 or 2-pound test, depending on how the bite is. And it like going back to Chloe's question, if we're fishing for walleyes, I like to use 6-pound test with the 2,500 reel, Shimano reel, and probably a medium light rod for walleyes. And if I'm ice fishing for walleyes, I like to use either spoons or big jigs with minnow heads. Chloe?
What's the best reel for ice fishing?
There's a lot of great reels for ice fishing. I like, spinning reel is always everybody's go-to because it's the easiest to use and it's the easiest to drop down with. but I like I forgot the name of it, but it has an automatic dropper. It's one of Clam's newer reels. Yeah, straight drop. Thank you, Mike. They get down there really fast, especially with heavy baits. They can get down there really quick, and they're light, and they help. They don't freeze up like sometimes spinning reels do that. If you get the wrong kind of spinning reel, they can freeze up, and you don't want that because then you won't even be able to reel, and your reel will lock up.
Go ahead.
How would you suggest finding a good spot to drop a line when you're going out on the lake?
Well, I don't drop a line until I scope it out. Well, I mean, I use a Vexlar sometimes if I don't have my live scope on me, but if I have a live scope, I don't even drop a line until I look through the live scope. And if I see fish, I'll try to get on top of them. If they're really spookish, then I'll drill a whole bunch of holes, and then I'll try to find them again and try to chase them back towards where I drill all them holes. Go ahead.
What kind of popper do you use?
Well, last year I used a Strike Master. This year I'm going to change to a new Ion.
How about you guys? What kind of augers do you use?
Mine's a whole, there isn't really a name for it, but I run a 6-inch Eskimo pistol bit on it with a clam drill plate to hold my Milwaukee drill on it. So I'm a drill battery operator. And then going back to your question with where to go when I drop a line, well, if I don't have like live scope or a Vexar or whatnot, if I don't, I mainly look for mainly there's like a lot of houses, and that's kind of where a lot of people go. But if you look around and kind of over like a couple minutes, if you see people start pulling up fish, you can kind of go over in that general area because there should be fish moving around there, and eventually you should be able to get a couple of them.
I use the same exact setup as Blake, the Eskimo pistol bit with a Milwaukee drill and a clam drill plate. But going back to your question, kind of like what Blake said, or if there's like a general spot where there's houses, you could go on the outskirts of the houses because the fish will stack up on the outside of the houses, and at night normally fish will move into those houses and they'll start biting. But if you're going out in like the middle of the day, fish on the outside of those houses.
I didn't put this on when you said that, but also if there's no houses or anything else, I'll drop down to the bottom and I'll bring it up like 1.5 feet and start jigging right there if I don't see any houses or anything.
With the rainbow colors of good jigs in the winter, where do you start going to pick which you're going to use? Do you use like 50 over an 8?
Depends on the water clarity, but normally I start with the pink and white or black and white.
Going with your question on kind of what colors to mainly use, I start out with it's called Wonder Bread. It's kind of like a rainbow jig. It's got white with pink, yellow, green, a whole bunch of different colored dots on it. And I've pretty much found most of the lakes that I fish that normally works on pretty much all of them. But if I don't have that sort of jig, I'll start with maybe bright colors and kind of work my way down. And then, kind of just work my way down from different colors.
My go-to color is probably pink and gold because that's my favorite pinhead in my opinion. And another good color that I like to use is a perch color, either green, orange, and maybe a little bit of red, or even a clown color, which is gold or silver, red, and yellow. But Normally, if you don't know what to use, you can obviously look at the water clarity, like Callan said. If it's dirty water, you probably want to use a brighter color, and if it's lighter water, you probably want to use one of those white colors. But yeah.
So on your rods, some of them have different amounts of eyes on them and some of them are bigger. Can you explain the difference in that?
Well, if it has like less eyelets, to what I found out is that these like right here, these are way more like they have way more bend in them. Like they don't have as much backbone. Like say this is only 5 eyelets, and if I were to grab this one, this one has 10 or 7, and the backbone ends up way up there. And that's just what I found out between all my rods.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
2 more minutes.
So when I'm ice fishing, a lot of times the small eyelet holes, the ice will get snagged in there. So is there a reason you like the small holes versus the bigger eyes on them?
So most of my rods have a fairly big eyelet on the tip of the rod. Just it seems like the bigger the eyelet, the less likely it's gonna freeze up fast and whatnot. But the little ones, if I get ice on the tip, I'll either like flick it or I'll kind of put it in my mouth and hold it there for a minute, and it normally comes off. But all my rods pretty much have like a fairly big eyelet on it, just to minimize that how fast it'll freeze up and whatnot.
Does line make a difference?
It can. The bigger the line, the less it'll freeze because it's taking up more of that eyelid. And then the littler line, it'll freeze up fast because it's not moving around as much and it's not as big. Chloe, go ahead.
What kind of boots do you recommend?
I run the Clam Sub-Zeros. Those work pretty good. If I'm not running those, I'm running Norfin. I like Norfin because they're really light and feels like you have nothing on, and they keep you really warm.
Going back to the question.
What's your guys' prediction on when we can get out on the ice this year?
If you're going way up north, probably Thanksgiving weekend, hopefully. But it depends on how comfortable you are with being on ice. I'm comfortable with 4 to 5 inches, and with machines 6 to 8 normally, but not trucks, 4-wheelers and snowmobiles. But yeah, going back to the eyelets, going back to Della Bay. Della Bay normally has the wider eyelets so that they don't freeze up. And if you have like is that a 13 fishing rod, right?
Yes, that one is.
They normally have like smaller eyelids and they get progressively smaller. They tend to freeze up quicker, but they're lighter. I feel like if they have smaller eyelids, they're gonna get progressively lighter or heavier. And depending on how big the eyelids are, if you have really big eyelids, I'm gonna guess that you're fishing for bigger fish, and if you have smaller eyelids, I'm gonna guess you're fishing for smaller fish or panfish. Yeah, that's kind of it. Question.
Do you guys prefer to fish inside an ice shack or outside?
I prefer to fish outside
And why?
because I get to move around and I don't have to listen to my brother.
I like to be outside also where there's barely anybody. And I don't know, it feels good with the cold breeze on your face and catching fish.
Well, I do tournament fishing over the years, and I've just grown out of being in a house, and if I'm not on fish, I'm always moving to find fish. So I don't have time to like set up a house and whatnot, because a lot of times your fish are always moving and you gotta move to stay on them, and setting up a house takes a way of time by the time you get it set up, they might be gone. So I just hole hop around.
Question?
What kind of music do you like to listen to at your house?
Normally when I'm ice fishing, I don't really like to listen to music because it can be distracting. And I don't want to daydream. I want to be watching my rods. That's only if I'm fishing in the ice house.
When I'm practice fishing before a tournament, I might have an earbud in or something, and it's normally just like country or something.
I don't really listen to music at all when I'm fishing. But what I really like to listen to is the splashing when a fish is coming up a hole.
Go ahead.
Ever fish lakes with nobody else on them?
Oh yeah, all the time. Those are the best ones because they don't get pressured.
Going back to up north, like what Callan said, if you're fishing in a lake like way up north, Canada or northern Minnesota, there's not going to be as much people up there, and it's going to be more relaxing, and you'll probably catch some of those bigger fish because they're less pressured, like Blake said.
Any more questions?
The whole,
Thank you.
The whole fam group will be back at,
Yep, 4 o'clock.
for question and
Question and
answers
answer,
only.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to us.